Hello and welcome to Compliance Culture, the podcast where we explore what it really takes to embed compliance in practice, not just on paper. I'm Lucinda Carney, CEO of Actus, and each episode will be unpacking how organisations can move beyond tick box compliance to build a culture of genuine accountability, trust, and ethical behaviour. We'll be joined by experts and leaders who are making compliance meaningful, from consumer duty and SMCR to training, performance and leadership. So if you're looking to bridge the gap between rules and real-world behaviour, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this week's Compliance Culture podcast. And this week I'm talking to Rob of RB Compliance, and we're going to focus in on the consumer duty, but specifically into the board report. How do we think about improving outcomes and reporting it in the board report? Robert, thanks so much for joining me today. Would you like to just give yourself a bit of an introduction about your background and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me today. So my background is in law originally and then financial services compliance after that, or several roles in compliance teams in regulated firms. But since 2012, I've been running RB Compliance Consultancy, and we do kind of all the typical stuff that you would expect from a consultancy company, from FCA applications through to e-learning and training. But as part of course, what we do, we provide our client base with a lot of advice on the consumer duty or other similar requirements from particularly the FCA. I've also authored a book on the consumer duty for Law Brief Publishing. That's a practical guide to the FCA's consumer duty. So there's me in a little bit of a nutshell.
Well, that's brilliant. That's why we'll put the link to your book in the show notes as well. But that's why it's great to be able to focus in on this. And I suppose the whole sort of piece, it's all very well reporting on the consumer duty, but this whole piece about improving outcomes, monitoring them, and then I guess reflecting it in the board report. What is it that firms really need to do? What, in a nutshell, do they need to do?
Yeah, they need to think about not necessarily what list of data points need to be reported as part of their outcomes monitoring or included in their board report. Don't think that the FCA is prescribing, that you'll include complaints data or customer feedback data or whatever it is. Instead, there's a kind of methodology to think about this that's really been showcased in the thematic feedback we've had from the FCA over recent months. And that is, first of all, undertake the fundamental thinking. So that starts with, what does good look like? What is a good outcome for your average customer on this product? Then think, well, once we know what good looks like, what data will tell us whether that's occurring or not, whether that's happening or not. And once you've got enough data to tell you that story, then stop there. If 4 or 5 fields of data is enough, great. There's no need to run off and get 10, 15 different sets of data. Just stop with the amount that tell you the story. But that's kind of on your average customer. But then also think about groups of customers as well. So part of that fundamental thinking, look at your target market, understand the groups of customers that make up your target market, customers with different characteristics. So the FCA always kind of focus on vulnerable customers as part of that, but you maybe have other groups as well. And good outcomes might be different for different groups of customers. For example, the kind of less sophisticated customers, if you like, less experience with financial services or with lower levels of understanding or education, a good outcome for them might look very different to your more sophisticated customer who's really used to the product. So, for example, a good outcome for the less sophisticated customers might be being guided through the process, understanding how the product works, getting that kind of fundamental understanding of it. That might be what good looks like for them. So again, by understanding your groups of customers in your target market, you understand what good looks like for them and what data you can pull out to demonstrate whether that's happening or not.
So it's really interesting because it basically what you're saying is, to do it properly, you've got to segment almost as if you were selling to, well, it is selling, but you're selling appropriately to people and giving them something that's really going to work for them, and you're measuring that. So it's not something that you can just kind of go, tick, I've done it, and do a real general approach. To do it well, you've really got to get quite specific.
Exactly. It's all based around that fundamental thinking, properly understanding your target market. And I've seen some, particularly in the early days of when firms were gearing up towards the duty, target market analysis as part of the product reviews that we were doing at the time. Some of them were saying, well, people that want to buy kitchens on credit or something as basic as that. And what's really coming from the FCA is that those types of analysis isn't enough. We really need to see that deep thought around who our customers are, what their characteristics are, and ultimately what that means for them. And therefore, we can then draw out, and once we've done that deep thinking, like you say, we can then draw out the good outcomes or what good looks like for them.
So it's definitely more the FCA are looking for quality over quantity, basically.
Exactly. Tell
Yeah.
a story. It's data for a purpose, not just tick boxing like that original target market analysis. Somebody wants to buy kitchens on credit, whatever it might be. That's just ticking a box. Actually, something that is quality and useful and well thought out. That's what they're looking for, absolutely.
And then if people, so I mean, obviously you talked about, you gave some examples there about products and segmenting against your customers and the target you'll be looking at. What other types of data, or what would you expect if people thinking, well, how do I measure outcomes? Because half the battle with these things is finding something that you can measure that's meaningful. What examples might you say that people could think about?
Yeah, so you want to think about the base of the product. So what is the customer looking to get from the product? So from an insurance product, it might be, claims rates, or you might look at rejected claims as well. So a number of customers that claim but weren't covered for various reasons, that could indicate that a product's not really right for them. You can look at for other areas like maybe credit, you'd look for what default rates, for example, early repayment rates, customers may be switching to other products. They're all solid fields of data to see whether your product's being used. But you might also look for data around communications. So think about it from a customer perspective. The good outcome isn't just, am I using the product as expected? The good outcome could be, I've raised a query with the company or made a complaint. And the good outcome I want is a speedy, accurate, correct response from the company, fully answering the points that I've made. So again, that would be a good outcome. And you can look at data around whether customers have come back with a second query, or whether customers have escalated complaints to the Ombudsman service or elsewhere, whether they've come back after an original complaint. And all that data can be useful for identifying that type of outcome. So there's just a couple of examples. So don't just think about the product, think about other steps in the customer journey, if you like complaints and queries.
And you mentioned complaints. Complaints is one of those ones that kind of comes up quite a lot in terms of an example of something that you can measure. But is it that common? I mean, I think people have got to be fairly peed off to complain. Don't you find in terms of don't they say that people to actually complain, there's lots of disgruntled people who just moan to other people or take their business elsewhere. I mean, is that the best way of measuring things, or how useful is complaints?
Yeah, it's a good point. Probably not that useful. I think I don't know how true this stat is, but you kind of hear that like 1 in 10 people that are upset about something will actually complain. The rest of the people will just let it go. So it's probably not that great in terms of telling you where there are issues with your product. But it does seem to be the kind of obvious go-to data set that we all include. And I think there's no harm in it. Yeah, I think it's
No.
not telling you a full picture. It's not the piece of data you want to only rely on. You need to supplement it with other pieces, definitely like customer service, survey feedback, although that has similar problems too, quality monitoring results, supplemented with all of the other stuff. But it doesn't do any harm to include that data because you are getting feedback. You are getting, in some cases, quite valuable pieces of information that you want to include in your improvement in your product design.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose again, it smacks of the fact that it's hard work to get the really quality data. So, do people bother to give you feedback that you can ask for it? But do they bother and actually tell you something useful and these things? But certainly that sort of intent to try and gather it. In terms of looking at examples of something like this, and I suppose how you might then take it forward into a board report. How do you decide what to put in the board report, and how do you sort of phrase it? Is there a best practice?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of my clients, along with the rest of the industry, has really learned from the first version of those board reports that we put together. I think a lot of them were focused on whether the firm is complying with the duty or not. Have we done our product reviews? Have we done our value assessments? What's the outcome of those? Do we feel that we're giving good value to customers, etc.? Very much almost a little bit of a tick box in terms of have we met the requirements of the duty. Now, the subsequent feedback that we had from the FCA and their good and poor practices was quite clear that they don't want the board reports to be framed like that. They want the board reports to be framed around customer outcomes. It's not about primarily whether you're complying with the duty or not. It's about the outcomes that you're giving to customers. So the board report should be an overview of the different products and services that you have, the target markets that you then serve on those products and services. Now, when you develop the target markets and identify those groups of customers within the market and their characteristics as were described before, the board should sign off of that at that point. So that's a key point. So that should be part of your report to say, have we done that? Have we agreed that the target market analysis is correct and we're happy with it? Yes. So let's all agree together what good looks like. And that would be done at the early stages. So if you're going to undertake your board reporting in July this year or next year, you'll be doing it kind of 9-10 months in advance, thinking what's the target market, what does good look like. That then, if you like, allows you to build your outcomes monitoring data in the way that we described. You then undertake that over the 9-10 months. You then bring that into your board reports. You need that 3 or 4 quarters of outcomes monitoring data to then feed into the board reports. So the board report might be on a product basis, and this is our target market, as we agreed previously. This is what good looks like. And from the outcomes monitoring that we agreed, this is the outcome. So it's kind of dashboard style reporting, but this is the outcome. This is what we believe we're doing well, and what we could do to improve our product. So that, in theory, is the way to bring the data up to the board of senior leadership team.
So as someone who's more of a layperson or business owners, though, so it sounds almost like it should be part of the business planning process as opposed to a specific separate compliance process. Almost, who are we trying to sell to? What is it? What are the products we've got? It feels really aligned with marketing if you're doing it well.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Just making sure that it's just not about the quantity of stuff you sell. It's about whether what you sell gives people what they need. And if you think about this from a business point of view, that is good business, because people are going to come back. If you're selling them what they need and it's giving them great outcomes, they're going to recommend you, they're going to come back. So it is good business in that respect. But it feels like it should be part of the same business planning process.
Yeah, and that's very much the regulator's point of view around the duty. So obviously a lot of firms will say it's costly, it's a lot of processes to have in place. But their point is, well, actually, if we focus less on simply profitability and productivity in our firms and focus on the outcomes that customers get, whether they're using the product, whether it's working well for them, that in theory should allow the business to grow with happy customers, etc. So yeah, absolutely, it's not just part of compliance. It shouldn't be compliance that produce this board report. Instead, it's the business, and that's the culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
While compliance will lead and advise, especially in the early days of new requirements, so we're picking up all of this feedback from the regulator, but all we do in compliance is relay that to the rest of the business. The rest of the business then need to build that into their products to make their products work in line with the duty. That then allows the flow of information through your outcomes monitoring up to your board report.
Okay. So then again, so focusing right in on the board report. So you've got a template, haven't you, of board reports? If you were going to talk us through it, we've kind of said that a lot of this is very product specific, target market specific. What would you talk me through a template or what a good board report should look like?
Absolutely. So typically you'll start with your executive summary at the top, summarizing the issues. So you've got that piece. You then might have a statement from your CEO, or if you still have one, a consumer duty champion, highlighting maybe a few key concerns or issues that they have with the organization. So that might be a nice second part. Then I would run in with my product data. So these are all separate products, dashboard style reporting, the outcomes that we've set, the target market that we've identified in the groups of customers, and whether they're receiving good outcomes. Now, I think the key there is to ensure that, or not ensure, but the key is that not all products will show perfectly good outcomes, because it's not realistic. You're going to have somewhere in your products and services that you could do things better, or that customers aren't quite using it in the way that you expected. That doesn't mean you're not compliant. What not compliance would be is not picking up on that and not doing anything about it. The FCA would prefer to see in your board report that there are some issues and that you pick up on them and you do something about it. So there's your data sets, but you also have your qualitative analysis underneath that. So where you have issues, where you have areas of improvement, why, what's the root cause, you've got your analysis, maybe supported by examples to draw that out and allow discussion from the board, and therefore you can identify whether resources needed in a specific area or not. So you have each product section. Once you've gone through that, an important part of the board report is then to review the culture of the firm, and it's important not to miss this out. So you're essentially then taking all of that information that you've just discussed, what we're good at, what we're poor at, and it might actually indicate to you that culturally we have a few issues in our firm. That's what's driving some of the poorer outcomes that customers are receiving. So you have a section in there where you review your culture and what the drivers of that culture is. You can then lean on the FCA's 4 drivers of culture, whether that's leadership, purpose, etc. So for example, if we pick one out, remuneration, it might be the fact that an issue time and time again with your products and services could be the fact that your financial promotions aren't as well balanced as you would like, and therefore you're not quite getting the right customers to sign up to your products. You're getting people that it's not appropriate for. So when you look at the reason why, if it's across several different business areas, it might be the way you remunerate or reward the staff that create your financial promotions. And actually, if you think about it, how have those staff members in the marketing team, how have they been rewarded throughout their whole career, whether it's financially or just a pat on the back or recognition? They're rewarded when their when their financial promotion brings in lots of customers. That's been their marker of success.
Yeah.
Where it's never actually looked at whether those customers are appropriate for the product or service. They may be completely inappropriate customers. So you can see how that drives poor behaviors, can't you?
I mean, that's what they say about the crash. A lot of this is, when all the financial incentives, it's this where HR links in with it. But if the incentives are sort of promoting or rewarding the wrong behaviors, then surprisingly enough, you get a culture, you generate a culture which isn't not ethical.
And then, from somebody that's worked in compliance, I always have those, not arguments with marketing teams, but discussions with them around they want to, present the advert in a certain way, balance maybe not quite what the regulator's after, and I have to, hold them back a little bit and, explain why they need to change it another way. It's a difficult conversation. Whereas if you just change how they are recognized or rewarded away from number of customers towards, did you sell to the right customers, or did your advert attract the right customers? Did they attract our target market? That completely changes their perspective on the financial promotion, and then they are naturally aligned with what you are looking for and ultimately what the regulator is looking for in terms of the duty. So they're asking us to think about those questions at the board level, to drill down into the root causes of culture. If there's one example, explore that and fix it, and then take action to change the way that these people are recognized or rewarded within the business in our example.
So again, it's got to be much more sophisticated. It's not just simplistic numbers. I mean, this is the interesting thing about any kind of metric, right? Because quite often, basically metrics drive behavior, but getting the right metric is really hard. Often the things that are easy to measure are not the things that will drive the right behaviour. So they're quite blunt tools. So this is where it is so tricky. I mean, also the other thing that's occurring to me that's very much coming through from this conversation is you're saying this isn't compliance's responsibility. So compliance are involved, HR's involved, marketing's involved, the leaders are involved. Where should the ownership? I mean, does this link into things like the SMCR? Where would this? 'Cause it's not necessarily going to be the compliance person, would you say, or?
No, you're absolutely right, and I think there's not a single point of ownership within the organisation. So one of the things the FCA said in the early days of the duty was they're not going to create a prescribed responsibility for the duty. They're not expecting it to be in statements of responsibilities for a certain senior manager. Instead, the word they used, or the phrase they used, was everyone's on the hook. So it's that certainly all senior managers, the role on the hook for making sure this happens in the way that we've described.
It's easy to say all on the hook, but we've taken away this idea of this compliance at the consumer duty champion. The problem with everyone being on the hook, it also means no one's on the hook, right?
Yeah, I know.
So how how do you sort of balance those?
It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, but it's driving that culture. And a lot of my clients still have the consumer duty champion in place they aren't responsible, but they are there to drive the duty and to drive the culture of the firm and make sure that the duty is raised in the relevant committees and discussions and that it's on the agenda and in people's minds. So a lot of them have retained that role, or the CEOs kind of picked up on it. Now they understand it a bit better and they're driving it forward. So I think you do need somebody that's going to pick it up and focus on it. But ultimately, the rest of the senior leadership team and heads of departments, etc., to understand their role in the duty and take their responsibilities as well.
Is that on that? Because I don't really know the history as to why the consumer. I certainly, being someone who's done lots of stuff on culture from an HR point of view, having people who are culture leaders who are championing things makes a difference in terms of change, particularly culture change.
Yeah.
What's the thinking as to why this cultural champion, consumer duty champion role has sort of been downplayed? What's the story there?
Yeah, it's simply the FCA had discussions with the government around lowering regulation, removing some of the requirements that they've put in place in order to try and get a bit of growth in the UK economy, kind of as part of that growth agenda. So there was a letter that came out in January 2025, I think it was, if I remember right. January just gone, although don't quote me on the exact year. It's all merged into one. But yeah, the letter came out from the FCA around some of the initiatives they're going to take following discussions with the government. And this, I think they felt they felt that this was a little bit of an easy win when take away the champion role, less requirements for businesses, less effort for them.
So was it a formal role before then? So this is part of them watering down. Do you see that the FCA are likely to water down consumer duty generally or not? Is it here to stay? What's your take?
They are reviewing it to see whether it's appropriate and whether it's something that they've gone maybe a little bit too far with. And I think they will, in places, look to lower the regulatory burden. So perhaps reducing the amount of times that we have to do value assessments or product reviews, etc. So I think there will be some. They've already started to do that with the insurance market, but there will be some lowering of the standards. But I don't think it'll be huge or wide sweeping. If you look at other places where they've, like SMNCR, for example, where they're looking to kind of tweak the standards around the growth agenda, it's very small wins that they're kind of giving the industry and not really wholesale changes.
So hopefully they're here, but the work that's gone into getting to where we are. And also, to be honest, this, based on the entire conversation we've had, it does make sense for the businesses, right? The whole thing, if you're doing it well, your business is going to do well. But it's not simple and straightforward.
It's not simple and straightforward, but I think one of the things that said early on in one of the I think it was in the consultation paper was, if you look at your board reporting currently, at the time before the duty, it was probably like 80-90% productivity, profit, all of that sort of stuff, and like 10-20% compliance customer. They're looking for that to be more 50-50. So an important concept around this is, yes, we're focusing on customer outcomes more, but it's not necessarily to the detriment of the business. Profitability is still important. That is still there. Absolutely. It's just we're looking at, alongside that profitability, a little bit more focus on, are we making profit off things that are actually harming people, that there's no benefit for them, in which case we shouldn't be doing that, or do our products actually confer a benefit on the customers? And if so, they're the ones to really focus on and drive in terms of our growth.
Should be sustainable. Yes. It's kind of like the balanced scorecard approach that many businesses do. So as the way I see it, you don't just look at the numbers top line, you look at what drives the numbers, which would be things to do with the customer. So it kind of fits there.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
Style. So just finally then, when you're helping your customer, you mentioned dashboards and things like that as to how you might measure things. Obviously, you consult with them to help them think about things, and a dashboard is a great way to sort of show progress. Any other tips as to how people can present the information?
Yeah, but I think it's essentially a consultancy project, to be honest. I think that's the way forward. So you mentioned before, it's each department needs to take their responsibility, and that's really what you need to do. Is you need to sit down with each department. Well, firstly, with your senior managers, and bottom them out what the products are and what good looks like for your target market. So you need to do that fundamental thinking first. So you do that with a business. Then you go away with each department and say, well, okay, what data do you have? And try and lean on what you already have. Don't try and create new bits of data. That's so much more work. Use the data you've already got and say, right, what data do you have that could tell us whether this good outcome is happening or this poor outcome is happening? So you work with each department and you build the data and you understand what the organization has. And essentially that's a mapping exercise. And then once you've done that, You need to bring it into a dashboard, a tool like yours, bring it into a dashboard that can
Quick plug,
report it
Actus
into
Oversight, yes.
There we go, exactly.
Yeah.
Bring it into, and create the processes around, regularly updating that data and bringing it into the dashboard. That brings it in. You design your metrics. So you design, essentially what's green, what's amber, what's red. You design that with the board. Often that's quite difficult to do in the first instance. You want to keep reasoning why you've decided that what's green and red, etc. But it's always a bit of a work in progress. So once you've reported it for the first quarter, you sit back, you look at the data, you think, well, is it actually reasonable? Is it actually showing things that are useful or outcomes that are good for customers, or is it does it need tweaking a little bit? So you've got that bit of work to do afterwards. But you work with each department, you identify that data, you bring it into the tool like your own, and there is your dashboard reporting, essentially.
Fabulous. Robert, thank you. That's been a really informative run through and on the board reporting and how to do it. And obviously you're an expert and you can offer consultancy in that space. If people want to get hold of you, how should they find you?
Absolutely. So my website's www.rbcompliance.co.uk, or you can email me at robert.bell@rbcompliance.co.uk as well. So either or works fine.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me on the Compliance Culture podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining me today on Compliance Culture. I hope you found our discussion was practical and insightful and helps us to see how we can all play a part in embedding genuine values-led compliance. If you'd like to know more about how Actus software can support organisations with performance accountability, consumer duty and SMCR compliance, why don't you visit us on actus.co.uk? The links are in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and share the podcast, and join me next time as we continue to explore what real compliance culture looks like in action.
Tracking consumer duty metrics manually can be time-consuming and inconsistent. Spreadsheets quickly become outdated, and it's hard to evidence progress when data lives in multiple places. Actus Oversight takes this pain away, bringing all your consumer duty metrics, actions, and ownership into one intuitive platform. With real-time dashboards and audit-ready reporting, you'll save time, stay in control, and have complete confidence in your compliance story.
Why don't you visit us on actus.co.uk?